Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends Sam Clement and Courtney Trush. I'll say hello.
How's it going?
Doing fantastically. Good morning to you, Courtney. You know, yesterday, as you all remember, after the sharp spike in nickel prices, what is it, Sam? Nickel prices went up 200% or something like that. Yeah. I mean, really just due to potential sanctions on Russia, which produces something like 7% of the world's nickel and all that stuff. Nickel prices have gone up sharply. Copper prices have also gone up 10% this year or thereabouts. And, I did a little back-of-the-envelope sort of calculations, and Courtney, might have come to some shock to you yesterday that a 5-cent nickel has 9.9 cents worth of material in it. 25% nickel, 75% copper. Do the math on it, and it comes up to be 9.9%. So every time the store gives you a nickel, you have doubled your money. What do you think about that?
I like it.
And do you think that might have had any of the reason why we had such a coin shortage last year? That's easy for me to say. And what does this all mean for the prospects of having paper or even coins moving forward? If it costs more to produce these things than their actual worth?
Probably just means a change in material. I mean, that seems like the easy route. If nickel's getting more.
Are you suggesting, Sam, maybe some stone currencies, getting back to the old Yip Island days and all that stuff?
Sure, a smooth round rock. Use that as a coin.
I like it.
But how often do y'all carry cash?
I rarely carry cash because when I have cash, I spend cash.
Right. It doesn't count, right? Because you don't see it on your balance sheet. You're just like, oh, it's free money.
Well, there is an element of that. It makes me sound a little stupid, but there is an element of that. It's also one of those deals when I'm at church and I have cash in my pocket since I carry it so infrequently, put whatever cash I have in my pocket into the collection plate. Well, it's on top of the pledge and all that stuff. And it really stinks sometimes when I actually have a lot of cash in my pocket. Just further
incentive to
John's such a good Christian
before you get to church.
Yeah.
So, fill up a little gas before on the way.
That is the reason why I don't carry a lot of cash. I don't want to fill up the collection plate on Sunday. But, moving to a cashless society has been kind of with us for a while. I remember back when Beth and I were first married, we were living in Silver Spring, Maryland, and there was a grocery store that we liked to go to, and it was Schneider's or something along those lines, and it was really good. Kind of a local market. You could get some good deli meats, that type of stuff. And that was the first place where I ever saw where you could swipe your ATM card. And Courtney, this was a long time ago.
Yes, before my time. Mm-hmm.
No. Close.
Before my time.
Before your time.
Definitely
before your
Sam's time.
Definitely before Sam's time. This is 1994, 95, around that. So you're certainly walking around.
Yeah.
Sam?
Not yet.
It is not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
But I remember thinking, how cool is this? I just swiped my card at the grocery store. And it wasn't really all that widespread. And then when we moved back to Birmingham, which is where we both grew up, I went to the grocery store first time, and guess what? I could not swipe my ATM card at the grocery, and I was thinking, what in the world is going on with this? But so I guess I'm saying this is because this has been a trend, really, going on now close to 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I remember my mom used to write checks at the grocery store.
Which is about the least secure thing you could possibly do.
well, do y'all ever get frustrated when you're at the grocery store and you get behind someone that is writing a physical check?
Yes, I'm like, who has
Or even
time for that?
cash, for the most part.
Yeah, that they're writing or
like
counting
they're
out cash.
pulling out dollar bills when now you can literally tap your phone on the...
And my mother, I'm very fortunate to have both my parents still alive. I mean, my mother, thinks this checks is what you do. That's what she's always done, So
Right.
checks here, checks there. And I said, Mom, you realize, and she's hesitant to use ATM cards because people steal and just kind of that type of concern. I said, okay, well, show me a check. And she goes, all right. I said, what's this right here? She goes, well, my name. I said, what's this right here? She goes, that's that's our address. I said, what's this down here? And she goes, I'm not exactly sure. I said, that right there is your routing number. That tells the criminal who picks up your check exactly which bank you're using. And this right here is your account number. She goes, you're kidding me. And I said, I'm not kidding you at all.
It's exactly how they pull it out of your account.
And then some people even have their driver's license number put on their check because they used to always ask you for that.
Yes. So then if you do, why not just give them a fingerprint? And a little blood sample. Courtney, what do you say about that?
But I've only used checks for when you have to, whether it's writing a voided check. I mean, they are so obsolete now, unless the few scenarios you use one are pretty much where you have to.
Yes.
I mean, I think I keep one check in my car in case,
I typically keep one check in my wallet, and then I replace it after it starts to fall apart.
yeah. And it probably falls apart a lot more than you ever actually use it.
I think there's only a couple times a month that I use a check to pay bills, and it's only because I don't want to have to pay the 5% or whatever charge if I use a credit card to pay the bill. And it's only certain places that transfer or like pass along that cost, and I don't want to pay it, so I mail a check.
Well, and then it just also in terms of checks, and reason why I think they're increasingly obsolete is people used to do something called a float.
Yeah.
Yeah, kiting or...
Well, not kiting. Kiting's against the law, but hey, I don't have enough
More
money in my
nefarious.
account. I'm going to go ahead and write a check, and I'll put some
Knowing
money
it's
in the next
bad.
day or
Yeah.
something like that. And back when interest rates were a little bit more normalized, businesses on the East Coast would have West Coast bank accounts. That way, present a check, and it would take several days to clear. So if it was a large enough check and you're getting paid 5% overnight money on it, or thereabouts, believe it or not, that was a thing at one point, then all of a sudden you're going, okay, yeah, I can make a few cents. And a few cents on a transaction like that might not seem like a lot, but if you're doing a bunch of them, it can start to add up. Now, however, thanks to the many wonderful technologies that the Federal Reserve has come up with, and in conjunction with the private enterprise system, of course, Courtney.
You know I have no idea what you're talking about at this point.
Cashing a check or depositing a check is instantaneous. There is no more
Mm-hmm.
float left. Whenever you go to the Walmart and you see them stick the
Yes,
check in,
and it
hey, it's in the system right there. It's
Do they
being
know if
processed.
it's good or not?
Pretty much. So, Courtney had originally asked us, what do you think about the prospect of a completely cashless society moving forward due to the fact that, no one carries cash any longer,
Yeah.
very few people, and the fact that the coins that we use are becoming increasingly expensive to use, and, we could use some cheaper materials, but we're kind of running out of them.
Yeah. But, you talked about higher interest rates in a time where it made sense to hold on to that cash as long as you could
That's
for
right.
a couple extra days. There's really no more of that right now. I mean, we've talked about a possible interest rate hiking cycle going on now. But, the difference between cash and keeping it in an account really is null right now. There's almost no benefit to it. So it seems, I think that could possibly be a little part of it, is there's the value add to having physical cash is about equivalent to having it in a checking account or some sort of money market that pays you, 0.2%? There's really not a whole...
0.2, yeah.
Yeah, there's
You're
not
lucky
a-
to get that.
Yeah, there's not a ton of value add to having cash in the system. And it seems like there's always a little value to having your physical cash where you don't need to go somewhere and pull it out and doomsday and all that. And
Right,
right now,
yeah.
when you're not making anything, you're losing money on it with inflation, whether it's in a electronic checking account or under your mattress. Might as well keep a little under your mattress.
Well,
Or do you keep gold bars or silver coins instead of paper? That's really worth nothing.
why not a little bit of both?
A little bit of
Courtney?
both. Yeah, I mean,
This is called diversification of your cash. So, but we all know, Courtney, right? Obviously she
Mm-hmm.
likes having cash. She carries around as much cash as a
You're
Russian
giving mug.
oligarch.
No, I don't.
on March 20th.
Mark Twain's, it's a 20s with someone else's picture
Yeah.
on them. So, Courtney, how often do you carry around cash? You asked about me, and I'm telling you that all my spare cash ends up in the collection plate on Sundays. How about you?
Mine does not. Mine is normally the only time have cash is if I've got to pay for
Babysitters are probably doing Venmo now, aren't you?
They all do Venmo, even though Venmo's starting this thing now where if you track it or list it as a service or goods, that it pulls taxes out.
I don't like it.
I don't like that either.
Well, people who are getting paid that way don't like it because it takes it out of their bottom line, but or their net profit. But I don't really carry around a lot of cash. It might be to pay an allowance or if to help out the tooth fairy or something like that. But it's not.
Well, how much allowance do you give Alex?
He has his own allowance. But our oldest son, we just started doing every other week for chores. He gets $5. And to him, that's a lot. But I'm like, if you actually take him to the store, most of the things that he wants are more than $5. It might be around 10 or 15, but you can't. I'm thinking in the day, like, okay, well, you get $1. Like, give all the kids $1. Okay, go to the concession stand. There's barely anything that you can buy for $1. Like, you can't even get a regular, like, water for $1. I mean, you can if you go to Costco and you get, like, a whole, like,
They're 25 cents at Costco in the
right.
vending machine.
Yeah, but you can't get that at the ballpark. So I think that is just interesting to me. Is like, if you were walking down the street and you saw a penny, is it even worth the energy to pick it up?
I could run some numbers and suggest probably not, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick that bad boy up. It's just the way I was brought up. I see change on the ground, go ahead and pick it up. I've got my 31-year-old nephew has told me in the past he doesn't bother picking up change on the ground. I do. I always have, but increasingly there's not as much change on the ground because people aren't getting change back at doing their transactions. I mean, you go to the grocery store, you go to CVS, Walgreens, wherever you go, and people are swiping their card or what have you. So people aren't breaking $1 or whatnot and getting change back, so people can't drop it as much.
But with regards to kind of the doomsday scenario, I mean, one, it seems like, again, I mean, we're seeing it going on in Russia. There's some sort of bank runs, and their currency can still collapse, but there's a difference between being able to get your currency even though it's collapsing and not being able to, and then the value add of, one, it not being tracked in the system. I mean, there's still tons of value, I think, to having physical cash that you can't.
And Sam, I would completely agree with you. For all the predictions of the demise of cash in general, I don't think it will come to fruition, at least not to that worst case or illogical case scenario, because you're right. There is something psychological about holding your cash, about having your cash. It can be in a cigar box, if people still have cigar box, show my age there, underneath your bed, in a safe or whatnot, just being able to hold it, whether it be in bills or coins or a silver coin or even a gold bar. Just the physical aspect of that gives a strong sense of solace for a lot of people. And I remember back when Amazon was getting its start, people would say, this is going to kill bookstores. And had the Kindle. This is going to kill books, and it wasn't good for the book industry. I mean, for all intents and purposes. However, they didn't all go away because there are enough people that like the ceremony, if you will, of going to a bookstore, buying a book, and what have you. I think we'll always have them. And the same thing, I think we'll always have cash in some form.
And I think you should. I think everyone should have a certain amount of cash. It probably depends on the person and one they're spending and what have you. But I don't know if it needs to be 1 month's expenses or something, but I think there is a part of financial responsibility that probably involves having a certain amount of physical cash to where, obviously bank runs aren't as big of a fear nowadays as they have been before, but there seems, again, going back to some sort of worst case scenario where you can't physically get your cash, and maybe that cash is worthless at that point. There's a decent chance that happens, but I think, to me at least, there is still a ton of value added to having a certain amount in physical cash.
Well, and if you take away the actual, monetary value of cash, right? What it is in your wallet to what you can buy. If you look at just the dollar bills and the coins themselves, and one of the articles that I sent y'all when we were talking about this topic was specifically about the design that goes into each dollar, and the design that goes into each coin, and the thought process, and how it kind of talks about our history. And I'm sure y'all have watched those shows that can tie it back to the Masons and all of that. That might be a book that I read.
National Treasure? Is that what you're talking about?
But it's
Under Mount Rushmore, the Gold Cavern. I've seen that movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, that's actually fiction.
Yeah.
Stealing the Declaration.
So you think. Anyways, but I do think there's also something to be said for that each country, has its own, other than the European Unions, but, that there's something tied to your
it's a way of telling
nationality.
The story.
Yeah, and I just wonder if there's nostalgic thoughts where people enjoy having the money and can tie it back, like teaching the younger generations, presidents and stuff like that.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I can't ever tell you a single time in my life when I sat there and picked up a $10 bill and said, oh, Alexander Hamilton. Wow.
What a man.
What a man. What a man.
What a mighty good man.
Little TLC for you here today. And I've never looked it up and then picked up a 20 and said, oh, gee whiz, Andrew Jackson.
And they change it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
or they're going to.
Well, they're going to change it, and they're going to change the style and all that stuff. And all the quarters have various things on them now. I don't even know what's an American coin sometimes. This doesn't look normal and all that
Right.
stuff. So I think that's just part of maybe the mosaic of telling the story, as opposed to, maybe the story itself. That you're constantly reinforced with George Washington, constantly reinforced with Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, that type of thing. But, in terms of pride, immense pride, I don't get immense pride out of holding a Benjamin Franklin. I don't. Do you?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
More
that's
than
still- maybe
George
more-
Washington.
By that, it was just
blue stripe.
I'm not talking about hey, I'd rather have Benjamin Franklin than George Washington too. But I'm not bowing up and prancing around with pride because it's a picture of Benjamin Franklin on it.
Yeah.
It could be a picture of Courtney Truss or Sam Clement on the $100 bill, as long as it was legal tender and not something that you bought at the amusement park. And I would say, I would still feel the same way about it.
Fair enough.
Your thoughts, Courtney? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, really, maybe not.
So how should we answer Courtney's question?
Well, I mean, I think it just goes back to, and I guess maybe you have, and I'm not necessarily right with that one comment, but in general, we've said that we don't think currency is going away. We
That's
don't
right.
think it's the death of currency as we know it. It's just, to your point, Sam, if it costs more to make it than it's worth, then we might be looking at different materials being used.
Well, in terms
And
of
I don't-
coins, in terms
yeah.
of paper,
Right,
yeah.
I mean,
Paper, yeah.
forget it. I mean, the government makes tons of money on making $100 bills for 30 cents and then saying it's $100.
Yeah.
Right.
And to me, I guess it goes back to possible cynical side of wanting money kind of not in the system or money that you can actually get to. And I guess silver and gold are kind of in the same boat. I feel like most people probably either think they have too little of it when those things are going up in value or too much of it when they're not going up in value. And I think it's hard there's really no such perfect amount of it. And I think that's how those kind of worst case scenario assets are, is you're either going to feel like you have too much of it or too little of it.
The thing is, we will probably find out that, in terms of a cashless society, we'll get to a point where we'll have some really bad solar flares. And the solar flares will cause massive blackouts throughout the entire world, and people won't be able to access their electronic currencies and all that stuff, and people will demand more physical stuff. Sam and Courtney, your thoughts on that?
Wow, you just really opened it up with that one.
I mean, I'm being serious there.
I know, and now a lot of people are probably gonna go to the bank and get some cash out.
And I mean, there's some truth to it. Even now, it's like, oh, our system's down. We can't swipe your credit card. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if you don't have cash, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many times does
frantic.
that happen to you? Our system's down. Do you have to pay with cash, and then you have to walk out of the store?
Yeah, and there's still areas that just take cash, and I think people can understand what their goal is. Not
What would
having,
that be?
I don't know.
Not paying taxes?
Maybe. Possibly.
I hadn't thought about that. Why? Okay, yeah.
So,
There
but
you go.
yeah, I think there's always going to be value to it.
And it's also the same thing whenever you go to a restaurant and they don't close the drawer when they're swiping your card or paying with cash. Actually, when you're paying with cash, they just keep the drawer open. All that stuff. I don't think they're reporting all that.
Oh, come on, John.
Well, we digress.
Everyone
Yes.
reports all their income.
Right, everyone is 100% honest all the time.
We digress. Now, so going back to what we were originally talking about, are we at the precipice of a cashless society? And I would say probably not completely. We're probably going to rely less on cash moving forward, as we already have. But there's still an element in the brain, in the psyche, that people want the physical cash, and then in the worst case scenarios, when you don't have electricity, you're going to depend on it. But however, I would say this about coinage, particularly small amounts, 1 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent. I could very easily imagine a day when we don't have those coins and everything's rounded up to the nearest decimal or half dollar or something like that. And I would imagine that will probably happen at some point in my life.
I think you're right.
What do you think about that, Courtney?
Especially as it
How many
becomes
years
worth
is that
less.
in, John?
Well, as it becomes worth less and less.
Probably more than yours if you don't start being nice. So, Sam, what were you saying?
I mean, yeah, I think you're right. As
Yeah.
everything becomes worth less and less, there's going to become a point where it doesn't make sense to produce pennies anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
You gonna melt down your pennies that you got?
No, I'm going to take them to those places where you can flatten them into like a little memorabilia.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
little
talking
design.
about? Like
Go
at
to
Six
the
Flags.
Birmingham Zoo.
Yeah,
Yeah, it cost you, I think, like $1 to do that.
yeah,
but
$1.01.
Yes.
Well, a cheaper way of doing it is if you live near railroad tracks, go out there, put some pennies on it,
Yeah,
and the
used
train
to
will
do
roll
that.
over. And I've done
But
that
you don't
before.
get a cute design, I guess.
That's right.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more about what we have to say or how we think, you can always go to oakworth.com and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of wonderful information. Now, Courtney, here we are at the end of the day. What else do you have to say about this cashless society that people are talking about?
Nothing left. I think we covered it.
Sam?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.